Oklahoma is looking to reform their prison system, and they did manage to pass some legislation, but then they decided to halt actually implementing some of the provisions in that legislation. And the reason why they did that was because all of a sudden it turns out that for-profit prisons wanted a little piece of the pie. Of course they did. They have a profit motive, right? Now, because of the Freedom of Information Act, the governor of Oklahoma had to release documents indicating how much these private prisons donated to her and her cronies, basically. Now, Avalon Correctional Services, Geo Group, and Corrections Corporation of America are the three major prison companies that work in Oklahoma, as well as other states in the U.S., as you guys know. And I want to tell you exactly how much they gave in terms of campaign donations. Now, when it comes to private corrections and their political donations, since 2004, they've donated $400,000. Now, of course, keep in mind, you guys already know this, politicians can be bought very, very cheap. So that's a pretty significant amount of money considering how cheap they really are. They've also donated $50,750 in contributions for incumbents' 2014 re-election campaigns. And also, if you look at the top recipients of this money, Governor Mary Fallin received about $38,250. House Speaker T.W. Shannon received $35,950. Senator Clark Jolly received $29,301. And also, Treasurer Ken Miller received $17,500. Now, the list goes on and on and on. We don't have time.
We're going to read every one of them.
We are not going to read every one of them. But this is obviously problematic because you don't want to have a prison system in place that has a profit motive, and there are many reasons why. You don't want them to fund politicians, so they pass tough on crime legislation to lock up nonviolent drug offenders, for instance, right? They keep pushing this war on drugs that we so desperately want to end. But that's just one of many things that they've done that's been very, very negative for the U.S.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, all of the legislation that they want to pass that would increase the sentences, make it more likely that you get put in jail in the first place, all that is horrible. But I mean, this can be appalling even without going to that level. I mean, the simple fact that they're donating all this money, like, why do we talk ever in this country about the free market? Yeah. Why would these private prisons put any real effort into being the best private prison they can be so that they can win out in the market when you can just give $400,000 and just get a contract given to you by the government?
And they have these contracts that are incredible. For instance, they have to make sure, the government has to make sure that they have a 90% occupancy rate, which means that we have to keep funneling inmates, right? So that means that we have to make sure that we keep arresting and detaining as many people as possible so these companies can make as much money as possible. At the same time, they're not private at all. Do you know how they're funded? They're funded by taxpayers. The only difference is they don't have unions, okay? And they basically have these contracts that ensure that they make as much money as possible, and they have shareholders.
Yeah.
You know, it's disgusting that this is allowed to happen. SB 1070 in Arizona was supported by for-profit prisons. You know why? They want to detain as many undocumented immigrants as possible before deporting them. Isn't that a little counterproductive when we don't want to spend our taxpayer dollars on undocumented immigrants, right? Don't we want to deport them immediately? No, we want to make sure that companies, corporations make as much money as possible off of them, and then we deport them.
Yeah, and it's been well documented in stories that you've done that they end up costing far more than the states, than the public prisons that they replace. They end up costing more both because they actually have to make a profit. They skew the numbers by selectively choosing prisoners who don't have any health problems, making it so that the public prisons have to take care of the people who are the sickest and the most in need of what will end up being a lot of money from the state. And so it's just it's a big mess, and people don't seem to care, and it's hurting the states, and then the states have to divert money from other things, and so you have things like we're going to talk about later on, where teachers are now taking out personal loans to pay for school supplies. Maybe it would be okay, or maybe it would be cool if we had the money at the state level to fund that stuff instead of putting it into the private prison system.
We live in a police state right now, and I'm not saying that because I'm trying to fearmonger. We have numbers to prove it, okay? When you look at the number of people that get arrested by the time they're 23, it's shocking and it's disgusting. We imprison more people than any other country in the world. Let me give you a few examples. So when you look at the number of people that get arrested by the age of 18, and we're looking specifically at males, it's about 30% of black males, 26% of Hispanic males, 22% of white males. By the age of 18, that's how many people get arrested. So let's look at more numbers. By the time they're 23 years old,
Damn.
49% of black males, 44% of Hispanic males, 38% of white males. When it comes to women, of course, or females, the numbers are much lower, about 12% for white females, 11.8% for Hispanic females, and 11.9% for black females. But of course, by the age of 23, the number jumps to 20% for white females, 18% for Hispanic, and 16% for black. We live in a police state. This is ridiculous.
Now, what I love about those numbers is this is one of the cases where I think that conservative sites are actually going to be interested in the products of science. They're going to take those numbers for the males and say, look at this, these black males are getting arrested at way higher rates than white males. You should distrust them based on that. And I think that they'll gloss over the huge difference between males and females and say, well, maybe you should distrust males. Because all of them, regardless of race, are getting arrested at extremely high rates. Now, granted, the thing is, again, you can misinterpret this by assuming that, well, if they're getting arrested, it must be for something serious. In many cases, no, it's like truancy or things like that. They're excluding any sort of traffic-related offenses there. But I think that those numbers are going to be used by things like the private prisons and Republican candidates for office to give you this idea that we live in an incredibly unsafe world when the exact opposite is true.
Yep.
Rates of violent crime, rates of rape, and things like that, murder, are at all-time lows nationally. But you don't hear that from the news outside of us because they don't talk about it. No, they want to focus on how we're all awful, we all get locked up, and especially minorities get locked up.
Right, and they especially get locked up for nonviolent drug offenses. That's what the reality is.
Yeah, well.